I have now the honor of introducing someone who embodies all of these things, who embodies the California way, who embodies innovation, who is the recipient of this year's award, Champion in Education, and I would like to invite up Dr. Michael Kirst.
Well, there almost certainly has never been anyone like him in California, in California's educational history, maybe just in California, period. In 1977, Mike Kirst was a president of the California State Board of Education. He was an assistant professor, mid-30s or so, and 2017, he is president of the State Board of Education. Again, 40 years. Can we just all give a round of applause? Mike's accomplishments have been legion. He has taught generations of students at Stanford University. I even sat in on a class of his about a quarter of a century ago. And there's probably numbers of people here and who've been on panels who have been influenced or have been students of Mike's. In 2008, he, along with Alan Burson and Goodwin Liu, wrote a seminal paper called Getting Beyond the Facts, Reforming School Finance in California. The first paragraph of that paper read, "California's school finance system is long overdue for reform. We propose a new system that is more rational, more equitable, and we believe politically feasible. Well, at its core, our proposal aims to link district revenue to student needs." And the paper proposed a weighted student formula that would set a base for all districts and then target additional funds to high-needs students. And that was in an academic paper. But 2 years later, Governor Brown was re-elected governor. Mike Kirst was reappointed to the State Board of Education, and he actually moved this idea for the state weighted student formula from the scholarly journal page to actual policy, marking the most significant change in school funding in California in decades. And very few people who come from the academic side could actually claim to have that kind of influence. So can we just give another round of applause to Mike? I've asked a couple of people to just make some brief comments who have had various connections with Mike. Rick Miller from Capital Impact.
Great, thank you. It's truly an honor to be here and to be part of this. So I was looking back thinking of Mike's career, which is long. And it's actually phenomenally impressive. I've been in sort of public education policy for 30 years. And when I started in my 20s, 30 years ago, the elder in policy at the time was Mike Kirst. 30 years later, he is still here, and he's still the elder. I feel like, it feels like my generation's like we're the Prince Charles of education, like waiting and waiting. But what I will say is that we love having you here. And actually, to Mike's longevity, I mean, I will say that in our culture, in the American culture, often we don't actually appreciate wisdom. We don't actually appreciate age. And I think actually both Governor Brown and Mike have proven what you can do with knowledge and what you can do with learning. You don't get a lot of second chances in the world. Mike got a second chance at policy, and he's owned it, right? And he's changed the landscape of California to make it better for kids, and kids of color in particular, because of his steadfast commitment to this work and making sure that he stayed around and continued, and he learned from what he did. And that to me also is, I think, what stands out to me most about Mike, and what I've always loved about Mike over the years is that he is, at his heart, actually a learner. And the sad part is that's not often the case in education. You would think it would happen a lot. It doesn't happen as much as you wish it would. And Mike is always trying to get better and always trying to learn. And we have had years of conversations, and you know, people who know me know that I sometimes can be critical of the state every so often. And I will often do so very publicly. And what I love about Mike is you can disagree with Mike, you can be very clear with Mike about what you don't like about what he's doing. He'll listen, he'll hear you, he may not agree, but he'll still talk to you. And he'll still continue the conversation, still be with you along the way. And that's a phenomenally admirable trait. And it's that goodness and that at heart willingness and desire to make things better and to live a good life is what makes Mike a very special person and why I'm honored to be here to serve, to honor him tonight. So thanks, Mike.
I also wanted to ask Tara Nishida, who's the Executive Director of Californians for Justice, to say a few words. Taryn represents the next generation of education leaders in California.
Can I stand up there? All right. This is such a surprising treat that I get to be a part of your tribute, Mike, because as folks know, I've given Mike a lot of headaches over the years. As an advocate for racial justice and as a youth organizer, you know, I am not high on the totem pole of power, right? But Mike, even though we have disagreed and agreed on many things, I'm really glad and honored to be here today to tell you just how much respect I have for you. So on my wall of celebrities, you know, in my imaginary home, I have Steph Curry, Beyonce, and then Mike Kirst. For a couple of reasons, right? Number one, persistence and grit. You know, Mike, you've 53rd year, 40 years, 4 terms on the state board. I mean, that kind of persistence and that willingness to keep trying, keep coming back to do better is amazing. Number two, the impact you've made. Especially in the last 7 years, you've put in so much work, not just around local control funding formula, but around Common Core, some new standards for English language learners, science. And one of my favorite things, a new accountability system that really recognizes the whole child, that includes school climate. Hopefully more school climate, Mike.
And every year.
Every year. But I think the thing that most, and just like Rick, that most stands out to me about Mike is just how you treat people. A CTA lobbyist, Governor Brown, and some students from high schools across California could be coming to your door, and you would treat all of us in the same way. You would listen to us all with respect. Last year, hundreds of students came out to the state board. You know, we were on the outside of the room. We couldn't all get in there. And you took the time during your lunch break to come out on a hot summer's day and talk to the students. And what you told us was, thank you for coming up here to advocate. As young people in this state, your advocacy is critical to a more just future for California. And I really personally took that to heart. I know you jokingly told me my life expectancy is much longer than yours, so I've got a good 30, 40 years more as part of the next generation. But I do want to tell you that you've inspired so many folks like me and many of the folks in this room to keep that fight going, to keep the fight for more healthy, more just, more quality schools for all our students. So thank you for your persistence. Thank you for treating us all with respect and for the impact you've made. And give me a hug.
And really one of the unique aspects of Mike's career has been this really remarkable relationship that he's had with the governor. The governor himself is unique, and to have had that relationship over so many years. Governor Brown couldn't be here today. He sends his regrets. He had a conflict, but I just thought I'd read to you some on-the-record quotes that were published a couple of months ago by Carl Matters about some comments about Mike. Governor Brown described Mike as thoughtful, careful, and thorough. He said, I'm always asking him questions, and I like people to know what the hell they're talking about. And he generally either knows or he knows that he doesn't, and he has an idea of how to find out or who might know. So I find that very refreshing, and he has a very open mind. He's not an ideologue. Mike is very much a person of inquiry. That's probably why he's able to create such harmony in a completely unharmonious world called public education. Kirst is a thoughtful person, and he's easy to work with, and he's learning, and he's open to the ideas in the field. So that makes him pretty unique, a pretty unique participant in this educational world, which is often weighed down with cliches and acronyms and faddish kinds of notions. That's Governor Brown's words. So Mike, do you want to come up? And on behalf of EdSource, we wanted to present you with EdSource's first Education Champion Award. It says, Michael Kirst, for a half-century of extraordinary contributions to improving education in California. Mike Kirst. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. And we weren't going to let Mike off the hook. We've asked him to give us a few words about
whatever.
The floor is yours, Mike.
Thank you. Well, I'm greatly honored and really humbled by the idea of getting this award, and so much appreciate all of the kind words from my colleagues and friends that have spoken about it. And I've worked with EdSource when it was a Coalition for School Finance. I started then and was on the board of it. I remember a small office in Menlo Park. It was so small we had to keep the door open to get any air in, and the cars were driving by, and so it had a very humble beginning, and it really has grown and changed with the times. I do want to acknowledge Jerry Brown. I wouldn't be here without him, that's for sure. I'm in a political business where only one vote counts, and I like that one as a way to proceed. And so I began advising him. I can't remember, it was 1973 or 74. I can't quite pin down the year, but we have worked together over all these years, including when he was mayor of Oakland, in working these things through. So I want to acknowledge his help in doing this and proceeding forward. And yeah, this is my 53rd year in education policy. I started in 1964 in the Office of Management and Budget in Washington, and they had openings in veterans, water pollution, and education. You can have any of those, they said. And I said, out of that, I'll take education, so that's how I'm here. And the best era, there's been two great eras of education change for me, is 64 to 67 in the Johnson administration, and then the period really from 2012 on when we really began to get traction. So not many people will be able to say the best years of their career were between ages 71 and 79, but that will be my statement, and I hope that's something for young people to look forward to. So in a few remarks about the conference, I wanted to talk briefly about two areas that haven't been discussed very much, that are very close to my thinking and heart: foster care and special education. And talk about that. I first got into the foster care issue when I did a report for PACE, which I co-founded with Jim Guthrie in 1983. And I did a report called The Conditions of Children in California. We had 27 authors and covered all aspects of children's life. And I sat in the courtroom of Judge Len Edwards down in Santa Clara County, and he said to me, if you want to see the failure of all of these agencies to work together for children, just come to my foster care court. And I went and I saw it, and it really gave me some ideas forward. And then my daughter, Ann, she is a court-appointed special advocate for foster care in Nevada County, California, a rural area. She also has a foster child. And so I've learned a great deal about foster care through her and through discussing it. And I just think it's one of the most challenging areas. That it got into local control funding formula. A major force for that was Governor Darrell Steinberg, and Susanna Cooper's here to acknowledge that. So I'm really was delighted when that took place. I think on foster care, which hasn't been mentioned in these terms, is what I keep seeing in the cases of these children is the drug abuse of the parents. I mean, most of it is, at least where Nevada County is drug abuse oriented. Just talked to some person in Mendocino County yesterday, and if we can't do something about that, I'm not sure what we can do about the foster care. Can't reunite the families because the drug abuse persists in that regard. So I think it's really an issue there. And I am amazed how much, as a foster mother, my daughter Ann has to intervene in the schools to keep her on the college track. I thought we'd gotten rid of, and more mitigated at least, stigmas, but because she's a foster care, they don't put her in college courses, and she has to intervene all the time. She's on her way, I think, to hopefully Cal State Chico, where they have a special program. So this area is really hard and difficult, and I think deserves some serious attention as we're trying to give it, but it is really, the education area is just one of many agencies. The other issue is special education. I would bet most of the kids that we will discuss during this conference as vulnerable children are in special education programs. And on my bucket list of things to do when I came back was to have an impact on special education, but it hasn't happened yet in any serious way. Linda Darling and Hammond and I got some funding for a report that, and a task force. They did a lot of good work. The Public Policy Institute of California recommended a radical change in funding, which doesn't seem to fly, where we would run it directly through the school districts and not through the special education local planning areas called SELPAs. But special education to me is really in deep trouble. It is based on a set of ideas from the 1970s. The basic legislation, it comes through the 1970s. It's based heavily on legal negotiations, legal rights, and in that regard, I think it needs another look again from the 1970s. So somebody needs to step back and say, we need to update that. It's something. The only worst thing I can think of is the California Higher Education Master Plan, and that was done in 1960. So those two are two that I will be working on in the future. The teacher shortage in special education is the most extreme shortage we have. It's desperate. I am so worried, and I know that many others are, and the districts are just scrambling to find people. This California Teacher Commission has done some really good work in upgrading the standards to be a special education teacher. When we had a shortage, we created short-term quickie programs that didn't spend enough time on how to teach or on how to help special ed children. So we've remedied that, but now it takes a long time and it's expensive to get a credential in special education, and it's not clear that the rewards in terms of the job, where they complain about paperwork that teachers do, is really something that we can retain people in or attract people to. California still runs the most segregated special ed programs in the country. We have the highest percentage of kids in separate special ed programs, and some of that is needed and some of it isn't. So that is, I think, an issue that I would say really we need to focus on vulnerable children. That's their education solution in terms of their IEP and so on, and I hope we can look forward to that. I'd say maybe the biggest achievement that rarely gets mentioned in this of the board and the Department of Education with which we work closely is overhauling all the curriculum areas. Not all of them, but most of the big four and more coming. So we've totally done new standards and new frameworks in English language arts and mathematics. We merged the English learners into the standards, into the English language arts standards, so that's no longer a separate thing. We're aspiring to be the national leader in the next generation science standards. And we've just redone our history civics curriculum framework, and we'll be adopting new instructional materials there shortly, with a tremendous focus, increase and better focus on civics, which was led in part by the Supreme Court of California, which stepped in and agitated and helped and formed a task force in this. Upcoming attractions is we're going to be doing something about I don't want to call it a framework, but an overview of computer science. What should all pupils know, and how will that look? That's a major effort for development in 2018. And then we'll be doing the health framework also in 2018. So those areas I think are important, and I wanted to acknowledge that. I'd say, my favorite number is the number about the percent of high school and growth in high school graduates that are eligible for the CSU through the A to G requirements. It was 114,000 in 2007. It is now 175,000. We've increased 53% our graduates eligible for CSU. It's really, and it's gone up every year like a continuation chart. Even more interesting is, for example, the gap between white pupils and Latino pupils in 2007 was 15%. That's now down to 8%. And the gap between white pupils and African American pupils was 13% in 2007. It's now down to 9.8% in 2015. So we can do this, and I think that we can move forward, and I'm looking forward to that in the future. So I'm going to close with our motto, my motto for what I've been doing, which is patience, persistence, which was mentioned, and humility. And that's been the motto of it. We're going to keep our policies on track. We're going to do it over 8 years. We're going to work on it. We're going to approve them, and we're going to proceed with humility in that regard. I recall back to when I started in Sacramento. I was 35. Jerry Brown was 35. Gray Davis was his executive assistant for the governor. He was 35. And Bill Honig was on the board, and he was 35. And our view was, if we just got those old guys out of town in Sacramento, we'd fix it all. And so coming back at 71, you know what you don't know. And I'm still learning. Thank you very much.